Jay. All right, welcome, Jay.
Hi.
Hello.
How you doing, Jay?
Good, good. Happy New Year, everybody.
Oh, Happy New Year.
Thank you, Jay.
I meant Happy Russian Orthodox New Year.
Nice.
Chris, how you doing?
Oh, good.
It's been about 1,000,000 years.
That's right. Yeah, this is a good reunion here. I like this.
Mm-hmm.
It's always a good day to get to see Chris Herman.
That's not what I usually hear, but we can go with that.
Yeah, exactly.
I say he's the best of a bunch of bad options, so
Yeah, there you go. All right.
we'll take it. The least bad option.
There you go.
My staff would say I'm like a unicorn. I might not be real. They hear about me, but
That's accurate.
Chris is actually in 3 other meetings right now as we speak.
Nice.
Hey, this is Nolan. Just let me know if we're waiting on anyone else, and just let me know when to get started.
Good call, Nolan. Do we know who else we're waiting on?
Everyone actually RSVP'd and said they would be
Okay.
here. I was trying to look at the participant panel to see who we're still missing. I
Mm-hmm.
think the majority of everyone is on.
Yeah, let's see. Ron just joined. So we've got Ron now. So do you think we can go ahead and get started then?
Well, I think we can.
Okay. All right, Nolan, if you want to go ahead and start the recording, I assume is what we got to do next.
All right, I will go through the slides quickly. Let's see here.
Hey, Nolan.
Yes.
I was muted.
Sorry.
Adrian Jolly on our staff is trying to join. I don't know. Does everybody have a unique sign on? Because I just forwarded her, I guess, what I got in the email. Does that work for her? That makes sense.
Yeah, if you sent the link or the invite, you should be able to access it from the email.
Okay.
Yeah, there should just be a button that she has to click, and it should send her directly to the meeting. Okay, welcome everyone to the Rocky Fork Blacklick Accord meeting. It is January 21st, 2020, 4 o'clock. Attendees are muted upon entry. You will be unmuted as appropriate. The chair will call on participants to speak. If you do have questions, feel free to send those questions directly to me via the WebEx chat box at the bottom right of your screen. You will be required to have your video feature on if you are speaking. I believe we don't have any agenda items today, so I'm not sure if that'll be an issue. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed through YouTube, and that is started now. And any comments received via the WebEx chat will not be part of the official record. Order of speaking, city staff will present application materials, and applicants will be sworn in and asked to present any additional materials they have. Registered speakers will be sworn in and provided 3 minutes each to speak, and commissioners will discuss the case and ask questions if needed. Just a last minute housekeeping item. WebEx went through an update not too long ago. I am no longer able to unmute people. So just be aware if you're muted. I may have to mute you just because there's some feedback or interference. So no offense intended. Just be aware of your mute. Thanks so much. I'm going to hand back over to Stephanie.
Thanks, Nolan. So I don't think we have any other housekeeping items. It looks like maybe everyone has joined, or almost everyone. So Kim, if you want to go ahead and get us started.
All right, sounds great. Thanks, Stephanie. All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. First up, we need to approve our minutes all the way from back in October. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Ralph Smithers, so moved.
Do we have a second?
Dave Paul, I will second.
Thank you, Dave. Any comments on the minutes?
I have a question.
Mhm.
On the second part of the second item we covered, if you go down to the 8th paragraph, there's a comment with Mr. Mayor, but it doesn't look like to me it's a complete comment. And I was just trying to figure out what was left out, if anything, or am I just not reading it correctly?
Looks like on page 3, second to last statement.
Yeah, give me 1 second. I'm pulling that up real quick.
Mm-hmm.
You said last page, second to, or second.
PDF page 3. Yeah, PDF page 3, second to last statement by Mr. Mayor.
And it says if the site is redeveloped, what happens? That's my question.
Yeah, I believe, without going back and watching the recording, I believe it would have been that if the site would redevelop, then the text requirements apply, but I can get the exact language.
Okay, well, I was just curious because I had asked the question up above a little bit. And when I first started reading that, I thought he was speaking back to what I had just asked, but then it didn't necessarily appear that way, or if it did, what he was responding to on that. That's the reason I was questioning it.
Yeah, sorry, I was just reading through that again now. I think what I meant, what was said is that, yeah, and if the site's redeveloped, then they'll have to meet the current requirements for as far as like city code goes, and I guess what's in that rezoning as well.
Okay, well, and my whole thing was the concern on the historical value, if any, on the situation the way that it was. That's all I was. And you had said that if it, that was one of the things that you were looking at the point that you approved it, or sort of approved it, recommended, I guess I could say. And so that's why I was trying to figure out, were they still going to be looking at it from a historical standpoint at redevelopment, or just to get to redevelopment?
So so they're going to do some changes to the outside of the building that that are in character with the site today. But if it is redeveloped, then it could be something that matches the other commercial design. So so it could have a completely different type of architecture, more in tune with a typical commercial site if redeveloped. And I haven't looked through the whole minutes, but I remember too, we looked through the Accord plan, and that site's not identified in the Accord document as one of the historical sites.
Okay. Okay. So in other words, there's no historical aspect to it as far as you're concerned.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, great. So do we want to make a motion to modify the minutes by adding an extra sentence somehow, or do we want to approve the minutes and just kind of
put a period at the end of the sentence, and we'll let it go at that.
Yeah, I can do that. And I can go back and watch the recording again to see if there's anything I missed and make that change.
Okay.
Okay. If you do it that way, then it's okay. I would have approved them anyway. I was just trying to get a little further clarification for myself.
Okay. All right. Are we okay then to move forward with the vote on approving the minutes? Okay, that sounds good. All right, Stephanie, are you doing the roll call today?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's see. Ms. Burton?
Yes.
Mr. Brubaker, I don't think is here. Okay. Mr. Chapelier,
Yes.
Mr. Gupta, saw a hand raised.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Hertzberg? Yes.
All right, thanks.
Jay, I didn't hear you.
What's the correct answer? Affirmative?
Yes. Thank you. Mr. Lucet? Oh, it looks like you're muted.
Who are you talking to, Stephanie?
Mr. Lachey?
Oh, sorry, I'll abstain, not present.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Paul?
Yes.
Mr. Sellers?
Here.
It's a yes/no vote.
Yes.
Yes, sorry. I'm on it. 2021 strikes already.
It's been
We're
a few
good.
months. We're all a little rusty. And Mr. Smithers?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, motion carries.
All right, that was the rough part of the meeting there. All right, thank you, everybody. All right, so moving on then, do we have anything under old business that we need to discuss? Nope. Okay, and then new business. Do we need to review procedures, or did no one review them enough for us already? No. Okay. All right, we will go ahead. No. Okay, that's fine. I just didn't know if we needed to talk about that again. All right, so moving then under other business, I know the City of New Albany would like to present their strategic plan tonight, and so I can turn that over to whoever's going to do that.
Thank you, Chairperson. So we're real excited to formally share this plan with you. It's incredible to think that this has been almost 2 years in the making. So we've done the most public outreach than any other plan we had before. And I think we've ended up with probably the most sophisticated plan we've ever done as well. So you might recall Chris Christian and I back in August introduced and workshopped this plan with you, I guess at the end of the summer. But tonight, in addition to us, we also have some of you might remember Adrienne Jolly, who's been on served on this board as a staff member before. She's the director of administrative services for the City of New Albany. And from our design team, our consultant MKSK, we have Chris Herman and Sarah Lilly. So you guys might know that MKSK has been the city's primary landscape architect and planning and design firm really since the 90s. And as I recall, they were the primary consultant for the Accord plan as well back in 2003. So historically, whenever the City of New Albany has updated its strategic plan, we've taken it to this board, formally presented it to you, and asked for this board's endorsements. And so this panel's bylaws says that this panel evaluates rezonings within the tenants and within a certain area as outlined in the plan. So that's why we sent you the relevant land use and focus area chapters. But tonight, or I guess I should say this afternoon, to help you guys out, what we focused on in this presentation really are the areas of change. And so that's what we've done in the past too, to outline so you guys know what that means for you as a panel, what's changed in this plan from the last plan that we've taken from you that you guys have endorsed, which is our 2014 strategic plan. So we have a lot to cover. We're excited to go through this. And so I guess with that, I'll hand it over to Chris Herman to take you through the plan.
Great. Hello, everyone. It's great to see you all. We're excited to review this with you. I've got about a 60-slide presentation, but I promise to go at speed through this. That said, if there's anything you want to talk about, ask a question, something's not clear, please stop me and ask. Let me know if you can't hear me. And also, I'm going to start sharing. And if you can't see the screen, also let me know. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll make this show bigger here. Okay. So, again, thank you for this opportunity. We have the new strategic plan for New Albany, Engage New Albany, completed in draft form. As Steve mentioned, we are here. You're the start of the review and approval process. We're hoping for an endorsement from this panel moving forward, but we really wanted to share this with you because, again, you are one of the groups that gets to see development that occurs in parts of these areas. So the agenda for this presentation, I'm going to give you a kind of overview, probably stuff you already know, but for those that are watching, a quick overview of the strategic plan, what we're doing. Talk specifically then about land use, about mobility, transportation. We have some identified focus areas, talk about that, and then have a discussion, and happy to answer questions. So first, the overview. As you all know, Rocky Fork Blacklick Accord, this panel and the Accord is really provides guidance to the 3 member jurisdictions, the City of Columbus, City of New Albany, and Plain Township on land use and development. You're the first stop when things are submitted for development. And the strategic plan for New Albany, we like to call it a strategic plan, but many of you probably hear people talk about comprehensive plans or master plans. That's really what this is. It's a comprehensive plan for the city. We call it a strategic plan in New Albany because New Albany, with its growth and change, really updates it on a very regular basis. And because of that, we're really spent a lot of time looking at kind of the big areas of change or the strategic areas of need at that time. As Steve mentioned, however, this was really a really deep dive. So this really is more of a comprehensive plan with a lot of public engagement and really making sure that we really have a good foundation for New Albany moving forward. So this is a map. I'll stop here for a minute to help you understand what you're seeing. So the city of New Albany is in blue. Those are the corporate boundaries of the city today. And we used as a study area everything enclosed by the orange boundary. Now, the orange boundary, as you'll notice, includes unincorporated areas of Jersey Township. Hopefully you can see my cursor in the north area as well as the southern area. Sorry, not Jersey, Plain Township in Franklin County, and Jersey Township in Licking County. The boundaries of New Albany are really up against Gahanna and the city of Columbus on the west side and the south side. So really the growth is in this area to the north, south, and east. The boundaries were really determined by the sanitary sewer, water and sewer agreement with the city of Columbus. So this is the area that if the landowner requested to be annexed into the city, this would be the areas that the city of New Albany could provide water and sewer and other services. So that's why we use it as the boundary. And then we've overlaid the Accord boundary in black, which really corresponds to Plain Township, the northern and eastern edges of Plain Township. So this is the area for all of your review as part of the Accord panel. So you can kind of see, we're happy to answer questions about the entire study area, but we'll be focusing mostly on stuff within the Rocky Fork Accord boundaries. Is that clear? Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. So the strategic plan has 6 main areas of focus: land use, mobility, which we used to call transportation, but it's really all about how we move around in communities, parks and recreation. And then we've added and spent some time on sustainability for New Albany in this plan, as well as community well-being, kind of all-encompassing both in sustainability and well-being. And then, as we mentioned, some certain focus areas. Really, those are areas of change where we expect to see development or the community would like to see something different occurring. So we spent some time on a few areas, selected areas. We did, as Steve mentioned, spend a lot of time speaking with the community. And we had surveys, We had stakeholder roundtables. We had a steering committee that met at strategic milestones through this process. And we had neighborhood meetings where we actually went out to various neighborhoods and people hosted us, and we presented some basic materials and got input. So it was really, we got a lot of great feedback and really got a sense. Some stuff we expected, and there are some things that were new and really helpful to hear. What we heard from the community, I won't spend a long time on this, but we asked about strengths and weaknesses and priorities, among other things. And so you can kind of see these things. I don't know that any of this would really surprise you. Priorities on the right-hand side. What really came up, and we were having these meetings starting in 2019. This is really before kind of the spring of 2020, but enhancing diversity, improving the sense of being a welcoming community was a big topic area. As you can imagine, people are interested in more options for doing things active throughout the community. That includes entertainment, particularly for families and teens, and more diverse community programming representing more diversity within the community. And also, we heard a lot about improving parks and open space as part of moving forward in New Albany. As I mentioned, we had a steering committee that we met with, and they really helped guide this process. We asked, what were the big things that they were concerned about, would like to address. And so there was a lot of discussion about, all right, what do we do continuing to improve the village center? There was concerns as new development was opening, particularly in Market Square, about traffic issues and parking issues. There was a need expressed to have better connections to the business park and across 161, that 161 served as a barrier and split the community in two in some sense. Again, big emphasis on improving inclusivity and diversity, kind of in all senses, both people as well as programming as well as housing, and trying to be a lifespan community. And in other words, how do we age in place? People that are in New Albany now, how do we make it so that they can stay in New Albany if that's what they'd like to do? How do we attract their kids back into the community if that's something they're interested to do? So we really talked about, all right, what are the gaps and how do we create housing that meets the needs of people across their entire life. On land use, so we'll talk about land use and spend some time here. Just as a background, you can see the growth, and again, this is just about the village, now city of New Albany. You can see how it's grown. It reflects the growth of Greater Central Ohio. You can see when New Albany became a city. As of 2019, we are almost to 11,000. I think the new census will say we're at close to 11,000 in population as the city of New Albany. This is a geographic map showing that same geographic expansion, which also corresponds to some of the population expansion from the start as a village and continued growth of the village, the country club and areas around it, the construction of the limited access State Route 161, continued growth north and east, and then in the 2000s, the growth across the county line and expansion into Jersey Township and Lincoln County. And majority of this being, and you're going to see this, employment uses, as well as kind of emphasis of employment uses along 161. So obviously it concerns all of you, concerns the community is not having really explosive growth, being able to manage growth across time. I think New Albany's done a great job with that. So this is the number of total housing units in each of these years. So you can see it's increasing, but it's been steady. It hasn't been out of control, and that's something we want to continue to do is steady development. It's not overwhelming and that we can provide services for and maintain the quality of the community. This is showing, again, more of the up and down that happens with economic cycles. This is the number of new housing units opening each year. So you can see it does kind of correspond up and down to the economic environment. But generally, you can see that average of almost 100 units a year is about what we average and what we're planning on continuing to try to achieve as we grow. So this is the current land use map. Use this as a base of reference. You can see yellow is residential areas, both north and south. And again, we heard 161 is kind of a barrier between these neighborhoods. We have the village center, which is here in gray, really important as the heart of the community. We have parks and green space, both within the city as well as on the edges. This is the Rocky Fork Metro Park. And then we have, the golf course developments, and we've got both Joint Park District and City of New Albany park spaces. The last probably 20 years, and as part of the Rocky Fork discussion, as part of strategic plans, we really wanted to focus retail in the village center. We thought that if it expanded too much out, if we had too much land for retail outside of the village center, we wouldn't be able to really focus the growth and the vibrancy of the village center. We really wanted to focus it there. Over the last probably 10 years, and now accelerating a little bit with this plan, there's a recognition that with the employment growth that's happened along 161, there's a need to have some retail that serves the employment centers. And you'll see that in the red here. And also even serving the neighborhoods north of 161 that don't feel quite as directly tied to the village center. Obviously, we're working on better mobility connections, bike and pedestrian, between those neighborhoods and the village center, but they don't quite have today those same connectivity that the neighborhoods to the south do to the village center. So expanding some neighborhood residential, you can see on this map. So this is the future land use map. And again, you can see we are projecting land uses for the entire study area, including areas within the township. It's not saying that they're for sure going to be in the city. It's saying if those landowners choose to annex into the city, this would be the land use expectations of the community of New Albany. You can see within the Rocky Fork Blacklick Accord, basically we have residential, we have continued expansion of the Metro Park at the northern limits, residential mostly to the south, the change to commercial as we get to the county boundary, the Licking County, Franklin County boundary. Also, we'll talk a little bit more about hamlets here and here. In fact, maybe I'll do that right now. This again goes back to this idea that we'd like to create some neighborhood, I'll use a planning term, nodes. So some neighborhood, small scale mixed use areas that have limited neighborhood serving retail, a little bit higher density housing, not just single family housing, concentrated and nicely developed around kind of a civic space, green space that really become an amenity. We're not saying that they're exactly on this piece of land or that piece of land. We're saying as a community, we're open to having some development proposals in those locations, as long as they're high quality, they have a mix of use, they fit with the city of New Albany, but to again provide that walkable development for the neighborhoods in these areas so that people could go to a restaurant down the street and go to some little more active space down the street, not just the village center. We are not, this is really important to stress, in any way trying to create a direct competition to the village center. The village center continues to be the heart. We continue to want to develop and improve it. There's ongoing plans to that extent right now. But we are at this point, this juncture, as New Albany is maturing and growing physically and in population, ready to say that we could have a little bit more of some of these mixed use centers. And this actually harkens back to the very original Rocky Fork Blacklick Accord plan, which talked about creating what was the term, that's where we borrowed it from, hamlets in certain locations around the Accord area where you could have a little bit more density and activity with green spaces and lower density development in between. So we're pulling a little bit of that forward here in this plan. Would like to show, I guess I should also mention, in these pink areas are highlighting the focus areas I'm going to talk about here at the end of the presentation. So we'll get into more detail about those areas. And then on this map, and I'll have Steve jump in here, but this map shows kind of the areas of change between where we all are today in the Rocky Fork Accord and what we're proposing that's either same or a little different as part of the future land use map of the strategic plan. Steve, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So either what's hatched or what's, I guess, the polka dots is where there's changes from the city's 2014 strategic plan, which this board previously endorsed. And so the polka dots, I guess I'll call it polka dot, is where there's been rezonings that the Accord has previously approved. So really what the polka dot shows is that we're just matching the future land use recommendations to zoning that's already in place and that has been approved by the Accord body. But within those hatched areas is where you'll see that there are, I guess, changes that haven't occurred yet, but is changing from the 2014 plan to this plan engaged New Albany. And so you'll see there's some what we call like the northwest sector along Reynoldsburg, New Albany Road there. Yeah, like thank you, Chris. In the Pulte and Epcon area. So those are previously commercial areas, and so we swapped those after looking at those as part of like the focus areas back to residential, which actually has been in some instances matches the Accord. So we broadened that too with that Hamlet's, taking that idea from the Accord document and broadening that and incorporating that into this new plan. And then the other areas along 62 there. So now that is a mixture of commercial and residential, and we've exchanged that and expanded that retail that's going along 62 there that lines that corridor. So that's that change. And then I'm sure you guys are familiar with the Winding Hollow site right along the county line there, just east of Babbitt. So that is zoned today for commercial. That was also approved by this body. And we are identifying that as mixed use. That will go into a bit more detail what that means. But then lastly, you'll see that we have expanded the business park. One of the things that's changed since the Accord in 2003 and even since our last plan adoption in 2014, it's just been the rate of growth for our business park, especially south of the Beach Road and 161 interchange. So we see opportunity to continue to expand that to Babbitt Road there. So that's what those hatched lines are in that area there. So I think that's everything. Yeah. So, so Chris, I guess I'll hand it back over to you.
Okay. Yeah, and feel free to jump in. I think while I'm sitting on this map and listening to that good explanation, Steve, wanted to point out you'll see dashed white lines. When I talk about the mobility and transportation, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But these are proposed future road connections. So as development occurs, these are connections we would like to see made as a community. I think you'll also see here the village center. This is currently undeveloped ground. The idea of creating a parallel roadway system similar to Smiths Mill, Walton Parkway on the north side of 161, creating that on the south side of 161, connecting with Worthington Road, Bramble Road, and then bending it away and using that as an access piece to the Winding Hollow area and the area south of Beach Road. Again, this starts crossing out of the Accord jurisdiction, but just so you understand the intent here. I think the other piece that's worth noting is this is a large amount of ground. We know it needs to have more than just employment, that we're going to have to serve it with some retail uses. And I think we'd like to see some residential integrated into this employment center on the Winding Hollow site, just because it's such a great site. So the reason we created this new category, which is the TAN, which is mixed use, and it's basically saying, and it's captured in our focus area, that we'd like to see an integration of different uses in this area. It's a little bit like the Hamlet, but maybe a little larger or more extensive in the sense that we'd like the residential to respond in some sense to employment, and we'd like to have retail that responds to the employment, so that there's a little bit more walkability, vibrancy, integration between those uses, and create probably an employment mixed use center that's a little bit different scale than what we have in the village center. We think that's important to, again, thinking about the 21st century, where the market is today, and where job growth is today, and what we need to be offering as a community. Any questions about this before I move on?
So I guess one more, like this is Mo, one general question. Just is specific to that, the Rocky Fort, the Accord area and the hamlet, like at the Central College and Hamilton Road, or sort of intersections. Sorry, the Central College, just to the north. I'm curious, like, was there like any kind of like traffic assessment kind of done to, like, how confident are we that the creation of this hamlet like won't negatively impact or adversely impact like traffic in that area specifically? Like, maybe I'm a little less clear on like how the hamlet designation or plan will sort of take shape. So just trying to
I think that's a great point. And probably it's the newest, most different thing in this plan from a land use point of view. So I think it's a great question and worth probably clarifying a little bit more. First, let me say that we put dots on here rather than property boundaries because we are in no way saying that the underlying land use can't or won't happen. None of this hamlet may happen. You'll see there's yellow under sections of them. That's expected to be residential, just like any other residential. The employment in the blue, just like any other employment. What we're saying is if landowners, developers could knock our socks off, knock your socks off as a panel, knock our socks off as a city, and do a really creative development that mixes some uses and provides services, amenities for the surrounding neighborhoods, that we would entertain it and be willing to have some discussions. We're not talking about crazy densities. We're not talking about crazy heights. We're talking about 2-3 story development. And again, in the description, it's got to have a focal point kind of public space. It doesn't necessarily need to be four-sided or centered around the intersection. We're just kind of saying these are locations that we think, and to your point, because of the road capacity and what's around it, could become kind of these little mixed-use centers. But they're not going to be large. They may be on one side or the other. And really, a developer or landowner would have to convince us that it makes sense. So, I think those are good questions. On your traffic question, yes, we did a whole, and I'll talk about even more on the traffic piece, the mobility piece, but we did a whole model with MORPC and engineers on the team to look at the capacity and talk about future road improvements. And I will definitely get into that. But we feel that the potential density we're allowing in the hamlet, should it occur, can be handled by the roadway system that we have. So that's a great question.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Just to provide some visuals to go along with that, employment center, we're using that term because it's not, it can be industrial, can be data center, can be research, can be commercial office. It's just areas where we have a concentration of employees, which is a little different than what you have for retail. So retail services for both our employment areas and our neighborhoods. And again, those retail areas are outside of the village center. The village center is its own special place with a mix of uses: retail, commercial, office, residential, civic uses, all integrated into the kind of heart of New Albany. We don't want to take away from that. Don't want to erode that. And then we have a residential. It's kind of self-evident. It does, in this plan, really we kind of grouped everything together. We used to try to distinguish the different neighborhoods, but really this is residential development, mostly single-family neighborhoods. Then we have the park and green space that we see as permanent amenities that serve the community. And then this new designation we've been talking about, and is the one worth continuing to have discussions if you have questions, is that mixed-use area, just outside the core mostly, except for Winding Hollow and the hamlets that are definitely in the core area. So we wanted to share with the community and with you, what does this mean? So let me orient this first. So the blue bar is number of residents in the city, and the red bar is number of employees in the city. The dark ones are all the existing current conditions. So you can see we've got New Albany, right? Circle at New Albany today. And we put as just benchmark comparisons, Dublin, Powell, Westerville, Gahan, and Upper Arlington. Obviously we could do more, but just to give you a sense of the relationship of the number of residents and the number of employees to each other, as well as just how we compare to places like Powell or these other cities. And what we want to say is with the plan that we're presenting to you in the strategic plan for all of the city, not just in the Rocky Fork Accord area, but the entire study area, if it builds out, and again, it would have to build out to our plan, but it could be 5 years, probably won't be. It could be 20 years, maybe. It could be 50 years, whenever that is. If it follows the land uses that we have, we would end up with just about 30,000 employees at Build Out New Albany and just over 20,000 residents at Build Out. And obviously there's a little range here because we don't know exactly what the development would look like, but on the densities that we're assuming. And we didn't bring it with us, but we have very detailed Excel sheets and land use and density assumptions that go with the map that we used both for traffic projections and to make this build out projection. So been very careful. I probably should have mentioned on the residential areas. Let me go back to that map. School district is obviously a concern, always has been. These residential areas are still one dwelling unit to an acre. As the density, we still talk about if it's age restricted, it could go a little bit higher like we've done in the past. But any denser residential development above that would have to be in the village center or a little bit higher in our hamlet areas, those mixed use areas. Those are really the areas where we try to capture some of this lifespan, community, age in place, different housing products that we've talked about. Anyway, we wanted to share this with you so you can kind of see when we show this map, what we're really talking about at Build Out.
Hey, Chris, Chris, this is Jay.
Hi, Jay.
Hey, did anyone look at the relationship between where people live and where people work in terms of living where you work?
Yeah, that's a great question. We did not. We have that material. We could share it with you. We did look at that. We actually looked at the journey to work data and looked at where New Albany, people that live in New Albany work, and the people that work in New Albany where they live. And as you can imagine, or probably the best way to describe it is residents of New Albany work in and around New Albany, but also heavily in Columbus, downtown, Ohio State, Easton area, were some of the big journey to work for New Albany residents. Conversely, people that work in New Albany were really coming from all over, all compass points, from Newark, from Mount Vernon, from Johnstown, from kind of all the suburban communities, Reynoldsburg, Gahanna, as well as the city of Columbus. So really a kind of a radius of where people live that work in New Albany. And I'll get into a little bit more of that here in a minute on the transportation. But yes, part of that mixed use land use category and the hamlets was to try to encourage some more people to live closer to where they work. So another piece of this, again, to do these calculations, but we wanted to share this map with you. We looked at areas that are developed. I'll put quotes around that. Areas that have been developed in the last 30 years that we feel comfortable are probably going to stay mostly the way they are. And then what we called undeveloped parcels that are greater than 5 acres and undeveloped parcels that are less than 5 acres. And again, I'll say undeveloped with quotes. There's agriculture going on. Sometimes these are rural residential lots. But I think what we mean by undeveloped is that there could be a desire for redevelopment on these. And so we wanted to look at where those parcels were and what scale and how that would affect the land use. So the green are areas that are within the city limits even today. So they wouldn't require annexation, but could develop further. And the orange areas are areas outside of the city. They would have to be annexed. The property owner would have to request annexation to the city, but then could develop. So wanted to give you a sense of where those areas are. And again, you can see our focus areas in the magenta boundaries, and you can see the Rocky Fork areas of change in the black. So that gives you a sense of where these things are occurring. So that's just a little more information. Hopefully that's helpful. We asked the community in surveys, what you'd like to see. This is just a high-level selection of those. Probably won't surprise you. More dining and retail, and they really make close to where they live. That's, again, another part of the hamlets and trying to continue to reinvest in the village center. Continued investment in parks and open space. They wanted to see single-family residential and office development. But again, as you all, I'm sure, see that, and we have discussions, there's a little bit of a disconnect. If you want to have housing that serves as lifespan community, you need to think about what form that takes to meet the needs. And then on the right-hand side, again, we talked about lifespan community. Do you want New Albany to be a lifespan community? Try to provide products that allow people at different life stages to live in the city. And the answer was resoundingly yes, 80%. You can see there. And then to the hamlet idea and the mixed use idea, we asked, do you want to see some more retail areas outside of the village center? But provided they're limited in scope and size and scale and really serve their surroundings. And again, the answer was there 75%, 70% yes. So that was the impetus, I think, to kind of create a little bit more retail outside of the village center within the city of New Albany. So we have lots of strategies, but the big goal is, as always, balance the land uses within New Albany, continue this vision in the community, and objectives are really, again, balancing the employment with the residential, balancing the retail with the employment residential, because they have different implications, trying to create some different kinds of housing options in the hamlets, in the village center to facilitate aging in place, continue to support employment centers. They're so important to the city and to this region of Central Ohio. And try to address the needs that we've heard from both residents and workers on services that they'd like to see here. As always, maintain a high quality built environment, invest in the infrastructure that makes all this possible, and coordinating with our neighboring jurisdictions. So that means Plain Township, Jersey Township, and of course, City of Columbus and the Rocky Fork Blacklick Accord, and why we're here. So those are the big goals of land use. So any questions there before I switch over to transportation? All right, we can come back to this. I'll keep going. So let's talk about transportation and mobility. This goes back to that analysis. So we did existing conditions. This is we did a compilation of traffic count from throughout the city and the region, and looking at MORPSI data. And I think the big point, and you can see it with these blue arrows here, is on 62 and 605. Again, it won't surprise you. Are really major routes of traffic today. In part getting to 161, but also going through the community. So 43% of all the traffic in the city is through traffic. And because of the 605, 62 overlap, we've got a lot of concentration of traffic in the village center, and we're trying to create a very walkable, vibrant place. That becomes a bit of a conflict. You want people, you want cars, you want eyes, you want customers, but you don't want so much that it's hard to really have a great experience. So that's one of the areas we're looking at. The other thing is, again, won't surprise you, the interchanges are places where we have a lot of traffic. People are getting onto 161 and getting off of 161. So this is where we are having concentrations of traffic. Hamilton Road, at Boner, New Albany Road, those areas. Beach hasn't caught up yet, but it's still developing, and now Mink Road as well. Those are probably in the future more than they are today. So we want to make sure we're thinking about how to address that traffic growth, as well as continuing to provide access to the employment centers. We also, and this is a key point at the bottom here, we have more or less fixed road capacity. We don't, and this has been a long-standing principle in New Albany, want to keep widening roads. We don't want to, the character of these roads is really important. We don't want to create 6, 8, 12 lane roadway systems. That's not at all what we want. So we got to figure out how to move people around within the existing capacity and character, and provide additional and alternate routes, and address the flow where we can. So that's a lot of what we did with the mobility plan. So this is showing you average daily traffic, and we're trying to capture with these new roadways ways of reducing. One of the traffic areas you'll see on this map is actually Smith's Mill. It's businesses trying to get to the 62, 161 interchange to get in and out. That goes a bit to this point of creating another south parallel roadway system along 161 as a relief valve. We've also talked long range about extending Babbitt Road over 161 to connect to Smith's Mill for a lot of traffic that's going southbound. They can use Beach, but this provides another connection. So these are probably areas of major change and investment. I'm going to jump ahead really quick to this, working with Morpsey, working with the City of Columbus, working with Franklin County, working with Licking County and LCATS about trying to improve the transportation and roadway systems outside of the city. Again, the long-term plan of extending Hamilton Road north and creating this as a major route to relieve some of the pressure on these other roads here. Ideas of addressing some of the intersections that have become, I think, areas of traffic concentration, both in this kind of growing northwest region of Plain Township and the Rocky Fork Accord, as well as the southern region because of the employment center and development that's occurring in the southern and eastern area of New Albany. So it's kind of northwest and southeast from the viewpoint of New Albany. So these are areas, and then ongoing discussion about improving lane capacity on State Route 161. And then this mill here, one of the ways to address obviously traffic and street capacity is to get people to use, and we don't have slides on that, but continue to use the great leisure trail system, the pathway system in New Albany. So the city's continually working on extending and filling in holes and connecting that system. We're talking more about adding bike lanes where we have the road width to do that, provide those kinds of options. But we're also working on basically enhanced mobility zones, and you'll see those here. So building off the park and ride that we have with CODA by the hospital on 62, and really creating a connection system. We've already got the shuttle system that we run throughout the business park and business campus area. We want to continue to build on that. We want to add, again, some residential here so people can live and work in the same kind of area. And then similar, we want to create more of a mobility zone in the village center, do some of those similar things that we're doing here in the central commercial area, in the village center commercial area, and make some connections. So that's what we're talking about. And then we have kind of future areas that we're thinking about depending on growth and development, as well as continue to advance the park and ride and employee access to the beauty park. So what do we really mean by mobility zones? It's the smart ride system, so it's transit connections, park and ride with CODA, making that experience more and more pleasant, having better connected bike facilities, and even bike stations that we can use to have people move around when they want. And then as we review, and this will be important for you all as well, building a site decisions, making sure that new development connects to the sidewalk and leisure trails out front. We'd like to see more buildings now, particularly commercial office, be closer to the road rather than have the parking lots close to the road so that it's better able to be served by transit. So transit pulling up, people getting on and off at stops, and walk into the buildings rather than having to walk across a sea of parking. Also looking at electric vehicle stations, those kinds of things. Always talking about trying to add more street connections where we can to provide alternatives for traffic to move through the city and the community. And again, the mix of uses so that we have some crossover. People aren't having to commute as far to get the things that they need and to live where they want to work. One other piece, and I touched on this, it's really important, like part of the character of this area and New Albany is the street character. And so in addition to the typical functional classification that we do for roadways, you guys always hear it, the arterials, collectors, that kind of stuff. That's a really classification about the carrying capacity of a roadway. We worked to provide a character classification as well, which is what does the roadway corridor look like? And so we came up with character types that respond to the business park, that respond to areas that are currently kind of transitioning from rural and pastoral into business park in the future, our retail commercial centers, our village center, the rural areas and the rural roadways that we want to keep that way, the traditional New Albany kind of village traditional roadways that have the horse fence and leisure trails and the large trees and our narrow roadways, and then our neighborhood streets. And so we want to recognize this classification, and as development occurs, we want the roadway improvements, if there are improvements made, to respond, and the development to respond to that classification of roadway character, in addition to making sure that the capacity works. So we have a whole section on that defines and then talks about what is included with those different character classifications. So we wanted to share that with you. And then this gets a little bit harder to understand, but there's tables that go with this. This is that combination of the functional classification, which is the main color of the roadways, what type of carrying capacity, and then the character classification, which is the highlight around it, talks about what the character of the roadway is along those sections. So this is putting those two things together. But it's important to recognize they're different things, but together they help create the character and function of our roadway network. So then the goal, really, mobility is, again, safe and effective movement of people throughout the community, but also maintaining that character. And so we want to implement those character classifications and review development to make sure that they meet those requirements as it occurs. We want to continue to protect and enhance character of the community corridors. I can go down a rabbit hole on that, but we're doing things like traffic signals that are coordinated so we can use existing road capacity better. We're talking about, again, some road connections. Actually, I should go back. This is really important. This Market Street extension we're talking about as a way of relieving that pressure at 62 and 605 that's right in the heart of Village Center. This is a key piece right here, allowing traffic to go kind of around the edge of the Village Center rather than through it. If your purpose, like that 42%, is to get through and not to. And again, as I've mentioned before, that parallel roadway system. So again, protecting enhanced character, and part of that is adding some additional capacity in other places. And then using alternative transportation mobility means and connecting in and encouraging alternatives to the single-use, single-occupant vehicles. So we need to continue to work with partners to make all this happen. So that's an overview of mobility. Happy to take questions on that. And then the last piece is the focus area. All right, I'll keep going. We can come back. So let's talk about the focus areas. This kind of pulls everything together. So the areas that we want to continue to see focused investment in, areas that we expect changes, new development, infill development, or changes of land use are really in these locations. So the northwest area, which continues to developed a while ago and has a number of kind of missing teeth, some sites in between that we would talk about, how those all fit together. Continued focus on Village Center and really making it a vibrant place. This piece I told you about, which is the Ganton development, we expect to have at some point in the future, that extends this roadway system, the Zarley Industrial Park and how to connect that better into the system. And then what the future of the Winding Hollow area is between Babbitt and Beach Road. So those are the areas. So we're going to be talking about northwest area, Zarley, and Winding Hollow in particular. So this is northwest area. So let me give you a quick orientation. So here's New Albany Conduit Road, so 605. Here's College Station, east-west, right here. Discover Cards right there. This is the Wishbone. So we've got some empty parcels. This was the kind of commercial office and research areas today. And we had discussions about future commercial employment research development further to the north. And I think what we wanted to do is say, well, what is the future of these parcels in our changing market? And what's the future along Walnut Street? Now that we have this fantastic amenity, this Metro Park, we're getting pretty far away from 161 and getting off New Albany Conduit. Is this really always going to be commercial? Is it really a great commercial site? How do we plug in better to the neighborhoods, both in Columbus and in New Albany, that are within the Rocky Fork Accord area. Those are some big discussions. You know, there's a lot of rural residential here. Welcome to stay there, but if people developers buy it, or if people want to propose new development, which I think all of us can see is gradually happen across time throughout this area, you know, what would we like to say about this? So I guess one of the starting points to thinking about how to organize this area is to think about the green space and the trail connections. One of the things we heard resoundingly from the community was, we love the leisure trail system. We want to continue to see the access improved, but we wish there were alternates that weren't just always along the roadways. We'd like to go into some of the park spaces, the trail systems that we have that go along some of the stream corridors, some of the parks are some of the ones we love. And so we would like to build on that in New Albany and connect to what Franklin County and Columbus has done such a good job of, creating these corridors along the natural features. So we want to plug into the Metro Park and Beebleheimer Park. We want to take advantage of things like Sugar Run. So not just the connections along 605, along New Albany Road East, along Central College, but also taking advantage of these natural corridors. So when you all see development come in, when we see development come in, trying to get leisure trail systems, path trail systems, both in New Albany and outside New Albany, that help build this network for everyone that lives here to move around. And, you know, we're showing this piece here. This is a transmission line. It's never going to be developed, but it seems like a nice way to get connections between residential uses and the GOAT and employment uses here in the city of Columbus, in the city of New Albany. Those kind of considerations, I think, are important to weave this area together. So when we talked about what the future is, I think we see these sites, because they're already really surrounded by commercial office research uses, that this continues to be marketed as office development. And then we really see the area south of Walnut, east of New Albany, 605, New Albany Conant Road, as future residential development. But we want to see road connections made. We want to see leisure trail connections made. We want to see them taking advantage of the Rocky Fork Metro Park and provide some more green space as part of this development that helps create a place and a there even in this area. So those are some big pieces. And then we've talked about the hamlet concept. So we represented that here. Maybe someday, even in the future, Discover Card, you could imagine if they could figure out how to get people in and out and not have to park so much around it. You know, maybe this corner also becomes part of this mixed use commercial hamlet concept. But this area we could see becoming this kind of mixed use area. It might just be one corner. It might never happen on any of it, but some kind of development, knock our socks off, show you how to create a great place there. We'd be open to it. This is now shifting to Winding Hollow. So here is, we should have put a mark on it here. We can barely see it. This is the county line right here. So that's Franklin County, Lincoln County line. This is the Winding Hollow, former Winding Hollow golf course here. Got some fantastic topography, natural areas, tree stands. We're saying, again, this new road connection that parallels all the way down to Beach Road. And the idea that this area probably develops mostly residential on the Franklin County side in your Accord area, but plugs in and relates to employment uses, potentially on both sides, but definitely in the Licking County side, that might include some limited retail as well. And that, again, this really needs to be a master plan, and developers need to come in and show how it all works together, even if they're only doing a piece or a phase of it. And then we do need to worry about existing residential along Babbitt. We're showing on our future land use map that this could convert into this mixed use. It can stay there as long as we protect these tree stands. I think it'll be a nice screening area for this. But if somebody eventually came and got some of these properties, we'd be open to having them incorporated into some kind of mixed use development that occurs as part of this area. And again, you can see leisure trail connection is really important to connect this area and maintain, again, provide these great leisure trail connections along the natural corridors as a great experience and great amenity to the community. So this gives you a sense here, probably should have shifted sooner. So again, we kind of imagine this area as residential and this area as the mixed use. This area continues to be really employment focused, but some relationship between these uses, the mixed use area and the residential area. Excuse me. But we really are hoping for a master plan that comes in, someone that comes in and treats this area as an integrated development, even if they're only doing a piece of it. I want them to convince you and convince us. Now I'm shifting over to Zarley. So here's 62. Here's 161. Village Center is just off the screen here. Here's Rose Run, continuing it up. Zarley was here first, and then 161 came in. It's kind of become a gateway to the north from 161. But there's wetlands and forested areas over here. There's the medical center, hospital. I think connecting, you've already seen, I think, an application for this, connecting this development through over to Kitzmiller and thinking about what the future is. It might take advantage of the medical uses here, seeing to put some office along the 161 corridor. So that looks like this, road connections, some kind of retail commercial use here, and commercial office along the Kitzmiller corridor. And again, we'd like to see ultimately leisure trails that go along Blacklick Creek. All right, so I'm going to take a drink here. Yeah, there we go. Also, we're talking about some streetscape enhancements in this area to really pull it into the New Albany character vocabulary. So adding the horse fence, street trees, decorative street lights really make it part of this entire area between the village center and the commercial center and trust court area. So that is what we have. Love to discuss with you. I'm going to stop sharing here for a second. I hope. Well, maybe I'm not. Anyway, if people have questions, love to take them at this point or have a discussion. And maybe I should first say, Steve, Adrian, Sarah, Chris, anything you want to add to what I've presented?
No, that was an excellent and thorough job, Chris. Other than just complimenting you and Steve and the team on all the work to bring it to this body. Thank you for that presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Your voice almost kept up the whole time, too. That
almost made it.
That was a lot of talking straight through.
Yep. Thank you for your paying attention. I know I
have a couple of questions, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Back on the population chart that you were showing, you're showing that the build out for the population of New Albany's going from about 10,000 to 20 to 24,000, somewhere around there. I guess my question comes from, because I was on the committee a few years ago that oversaw what the schools were going to be doing in the future and all that kind of stuff. In reading through, the same question kept popping up. How is all of this going to affect the schools and what they thought? So you're saying, and I appreciate the fact you were going through and saying, oh, well, we're taking all of this stuff into consideration. I guess my question is if the population is going to double for general population and you're trying to keep things down, and I know how you're trying to do all that, but what percentage of increase do you expect the schools to have with this doubling of population?
So great question. I'm glad you asked that. I should have probably touched on that. One of the reasons I showed that housing construction averaging about 100 a year, and I should have reinforced this point, is that while we're showing a future build out of potentially 20,000 residents, so from 11 to 20, so adding 9,000 residents across time, if we're only adding about 100 units a year, we're talking a long time from now that we'll ever get there.
Well, but you were talking also in there about higher density populations. And
yes.
That's why I'm wondering, because in looking at the land use and seeing how it's been done up to this point and what you're looking at trying to do to the future, and one of the things I noticed you didn't show anywhere in there the Winding Hollow, or not Winding Hollow, the golf course. Now, was that not shown because it's a privately owned and could be redone for future expansion, making single family homes, or?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, if that area redeveloped, we haven't changed anything there. That would still be a 1 unit to an acre density if the owner wanted to redevelop. That was what it would be.
Okay, so I guess back to my original question: how much do you think the school population would increase if the population increased by double?
Yeah, I don't have the information right with me, but I guess maybe one way to answer that is when we talk about something beyond single family residential development, so that would be those hamlet areas and the village center. And again, the hamlets just possibly, but the village center for sure. Those kind of developments, we're trying to create housing that's the age and place housing. So allowing people to live there that probably don't have children. So our information on that projects, in part because of the price points of like the Market and Main development, is there are very few school children. In fact, superintendent was on our steering committee and said that he was not concerned about that at all if it's those kind of products because they generate so few kids, but also do have property tax generation, which helps the schools. So, Adrienne, you were as part of that discussion. Anything you want to add?
You know, the two things I can think of adding, it goes back to the density in terms of where most of our residential areas, we recommend a density of 1 unit per acre. That historically has come from a desire to protect the schools and allow the schools to plan appropriately for increase in enrollment. It also goes back to the Rocky Fork Blacklick Accord, the original document, and the subsequent document, and trying to encourage conservation development and cluster development. And so while your overall gross density of a project is at 1 unit per acre, we hope to achieve that through smaller lots and adequate and abundant open space. Right. You know, the other thing that's interesting, I know, Mike, that you were on that committee, several years ago. I've done some research lately thinking through the city's land use policies, and there was a school finance committee from the late 90s that made a recommendation to the city in terms of a land use split between commercial and residential. And what they thought at the time the schools needed was about 35% commercial land uses versus the remainder being residential. And I think the way the city has grown with the addition and expansion of the business park, I think we've almost flipped that percentage. And our land uses, I think we are close to maybe 70% commercial or income generating land uses and a 30% residential land use split.
Okay. Well, I would like to say that from what I was able to determine, I think it's a fantastic plan, and I can hardly wait to get older so I can enjoy all these things. I know it's not going to happen right away.
That's great. Thank you.
I usually don't hear people say they want to get older.
Well, I can't enjoy them yet, so I gotta wait till I get older.
There you go.
That's good. Make sure that's in the minutes that Mike wants to get older. Perfect. Does anyone else want to jump in with comments?
Yeah, I just have. I was trying to say we all want to get older. Don't ever not want to get older. But just wanted to get back. I was, looking at the plan and just thinking about my own experiences. And this is really tactical, low in the weeds, not the high level. So forgive me if that throws us off. But I just wondered if there was ever thought about additional, pedestrian bridges or leisure type bridges that go over the highway. I know that for me, as a person that likes to ride my bike around, I don't go north just because I don't want to deal with that. So I just wanted to see what if that had been under consideration or what the thought is. I don't even know if it's practical, but just wanted to throw it out.
I actually love that question. That's a fantastic question. We do have stuff not with me, but yes, we actually, New Albany did a Bike New Albany plan that we do incorporate recommendations from in this strategic plan. And in fact, I think on one of the slides you probably saw it said something about a Velo loop. One of the things in there was the discussion of basically creating a loop that goes through New Albany goes to the village center, goes out Dublin Granville Road, crosses at Kitzmiller, and then goes along Walton Parkway, Smiths Mill and Walton Parkway, and then comes back. And this is probably, I think, the part that a number of us get excited about. Would create a new bridge connection between the community park, learning campus, and the development on the north side of 161. So it would allow pedestrians and bicyclists to cross between the north and south sides without going to New Albany Road and that trying to get through that interchange and all the traffic there. And it would basically create a loop system that would allow us to really connect all of the great trails and path systems in a way that I think is safer and better and more inviting for everybody. In addition to what's right now starting to happen is the city's working on improvements for pedestrians and bikes under 60, part of 62 under 161. So I think between that and the idea of a future bridge, to your point, improvement over by the learning campus in Swicker Woods, I think and expansion improvements on the Kitzmiller Bridge, we get some much better connectivity north-south for people on bikes and people walking. Adrian or Steve, do you want to add anything, or Chris?
You know, I do have another place we've explored a possible pedestrian bridge over 161 is on the city's western boundary at the Rocky Fork Creek. So Rocky Fork is a Central Ohio Greenway designated greenway, and we co-funded a feasibility study with the City of Columbus and the Metro Park organization to see if a pedestrian bridge over 161 along the Rocky Fork Creek would be feasible, what our technical challenges, and you know, what the costs would be. And so I think that's a longer term project, but we have at least preliminary engineering information to know what that would take. And if we can work cooperatively on that, I think it eventually would be a great project to get maybe some grant funding for, because it could connect. Columbus has a lot of parkland to the north of 161, and it could create a nice greenway connection up into the Metro Park.
Hey, this is Jay. May I chip in on what Adrian just mentioned there and staff? Hi, Adrian. It's been a while. Good, but NACO's doing a project, a wetland enhancement project in the area you just described. Could you give the board members a little flavor about that project?
Yeah, so that is on the building company bought the historic Taylor Farm, which I had the opportunity to go into that farm building about a year ago before NACO acquired it, and it's an amazing historical and cultural resource for the area. The Taylor family has been in this area and farmed that area since the early 1800s, and there were actually documents from the 1800s in the attic of that building, which was amazing. So the New Albany Company bought that. Mrs. Taylor actually, member of one of the founding families, just passed away a couple weeks ago. She was reached, into her 90s, and just had a tremendous history in the area. And what the city, we have a Clean Ohio grant to purchase the farm from the New Albany Company once they're done with creating wetlands for their wetland mitigation project. And we want to turn that into the Taylor Farm Park. So we have in our capital budget for 2021, a phase 1 project that would include we hope up to 3 miles of trails around the wetlands, some parking, some seating areas, trail connections into the neighborhood so people don't have to drive there to go and enjoy the park. That would be the phase 1 of park development. We hope that we're able to do more, maybe renovate and preserve that house, which would, be quite an investment, but I think that would be a great thing for the community. So I think it's a longer term park development project for the city, but I think it's going to be a great amenity, not just for New Albany, but for this whole area.
Great.
Thanks for asking, Jay.
Yeah. I've got a couple comments I'd like to run through too, Chris. Very sharp looking plan, very polished professional as always from MKSK. impressed with all the public involvement efforts too. It was great that you got so much participation, so that was well done. I love the themes of sustainability, the diversity, as much as you could obviously incorporate into a plan is important. The aging in place is really appropriate, especially for New Albany and right now. Mobility and connectivity look great, all the housing options. The public survey results seem to be right in line with what you're doing, with people wanting more parks, more dining, more entertainment. Part of our focus with our panel is on the environment, and I've definitely liked all the sustainable development standards that you've incorporated kind of at a high level and specifically in the plan so far. Seems like you kind of pulled a lot from some of the LEED standards and just kind of rebranded them for sustainable development standards, so I appreciated that. I didn't know if we wanted to even try requiring LEED, but it seems like you're already basically doing it without having to pay the fee of getting things verified. I know
that's part of it.
yeah, I was going to say, I know OSU's doing that now too. I know there's a new LEED for Cities program with the ARC platform which might be really fascinating to think about in the future related to all this. Also related to the environment, kind of with what we were just talking about. 161 is certainly that huge elephant in the room physical barrier, both for people and for the environment. And, thinking about all these natural areas and instead of like a bridge for pedestrian bikes, maybe thinking about underpasses where we're actually focusing on where the natural environment's already going, look at wildlife underpasses that are integrated with pet and bike usage. And maybe you could, in the plan, just kind of point out some of those natural areas. And obviously that is not inexpensive. And, ODOT always loves it when you mess with their roads. So that's something that would be much later, but just kind of designating maybe some of those areas that could be explored later and definitely grant funding for stuff like that. But I wouldn't just restrict it to just thinking about a bridge, but also wildlife and environmental types of considerations there.
That's a great comment. Thank you. Yep.
Chris. And then let's see, when I was looking through this, I really liked the idea of the employment centers, especially the fact that you called them dynamic employment centers, because we're definitely in a very dynamic world right now with how people are thinking about employment. And you started this plan 2 years ago when we were in a very different world. And I don't know if we're talking addendum here or scope creep, but really thinking about these office parks and these business parks and office buildings, and the fact that the current pandemic trends are showing that we might not fully come back from the direction we headed this last year. And thinking about what's our vacancy rate looking like with these office spaces versus what we're planning to develop or have already planned to develop versus in this plan, and really thinking about maybe some additional creative options where still keeping these designations as you've shown them, but instead of really focusing on office parks, more flexible spaces like shared office spaces, other kinds of incubators or live work units or something like that are more full service for how people may be starting to live and work versus traditional office space. So that's something I was thinking a lot about. I'm sure, Chris, you guys have had conversations, and I didn't know where you were with that thought process.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we could spend a lot of time talking about that. That was, I think, what we were trying to get at with the mixed use area, Winding Hollow, Beach Road, is to give some flexibility so that people didn't just come in and bring an office park, that think about it more holistically, and that's what we're looking for. And I think a smaller scale version of that is what we were thinking about for the hamlet. So the live work, I think that's a great application if we could get that as part of the kind of hamlet development. And I think we're going to see how this goes. The hope is we can fill some of these office sites, but depending on where we go in the next couple of years, there may be we may be back in front of you with some how do you help the office parks move forward, in the coming years?
Yeah, it's like, how do you zone and regulate so whatever is built is dynamic enough to survive these changing times? And that's the multi-million-dollar question right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting because we were drafting this, during the pandemic, and we certainly went back and had several discussions about we have to acknowledge where we are, but we also don't have those answers yet. We don't know the full impact. So we did write into the plan from in the land use section, kind of what was happening, where we are right now, and how we have to revisit this in the future. I think it's also interesting because the beginnings of the New Albany Business Park was the Discover campus that is in the Rocky Fork Blacklick Accord, and that started in 1998. And you think about that campus now and that area versus how people are working today. I think that is really the primary reason why we revisit the strategic plan every 5 years or so, because we can adjust based on what's going on in the market or what development has happened in the area. And I certainly think we probably, like you said, Chris, will maybe back before even 5 years with more recommendations based on where the market is going and where employment centers are going in the future.
Yeah, and I think the idea of the additional nodes or hubs that you're looking at will really help, because even if some of these things need to change over in the future, at least you've already got some nice nodes where people could live there in a multifamily situation in the future, something like that. So I think that those will be very helpful. Let's see. Yeah, so good luck solving that minor problem that's going on right now. Yes, and then let's see. I think two other areas I wanted to comment on the let's see, for the Winding Hollow area. I know that's kind of one of the major changes to the mixed use, and I'm always supportive, obviously, of the mixed use approach. I think my one issue is with 161. And I know you guys hear me talk about the impacts of people living near 161 frequently enough that you're probably tired of hearing about it sometimes. But I think that with those mixed use areas, those are great. I think we just want to make sure we are not sticking any more residential along 161. It just is really unhealthy for people. And it's just if we have the opportunity to do it right now, thinking about those maybe being when you're thinking about your different colors on that future land use map, maybe keep those blue within like 300-400 feet of 161. So the businesses like that frontage, the people don't need it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely.
Yep. And yeah, I think when I of course nerded out on this once and ran a noise model just because I couldn't help myself, and I think it was like 300 to 400 feet was the kind of the magic number. Just FYI.
That's great. Okay.
Yeah. And let's see. And then the very last thing on the mobility zones, I liked how you did that. I think I was thinking about mobility hubs like we did in Newark years ago, Chris, and having all of those different modes come together so you can easily transition, I think is great that you're already thinking about that and planning for it with this plan. I think one thing to think about with those mobility zones is definitely making sure we've got some traffic calming standards in place in those areas so that it is safe for everyone to transition between the different modes, and making sure that certain accessibility standards are built into those zones so anyone of any kind of ability is able to utilize those zones. And then really just thinking about that development that's going to occur around those zones, obviously maybe allowing some different higher densities right around those zones. I think kind of like transit oriented development type of things would be appealing.
That's a great comment. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's as far as I got with my notes. But overall, the presentation really helped me kind of refine some of these, and it's looking really great. And I can tell you guys put a lot of work into it.
Thank you. Those are great comments.
Yeah. Thanks.
I know Sarah's taking notes. So.
Okay. I don't have to email my notes to you later, Sarah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Perfect. All right. That's all of the comments that I had. Did anyone else think of anything while I was talking forever?
This is Ron, and I just appreciate the flexibility of this plan. as you said, Kimberly, it's going to be very important as we move forward.
Yeah.
So I think just keeping this flexible so we can continue to react to the market as well as the environment is going to be very important.
Great point, Ron. Yep. Any other additional comments? Mike, you always think of something at the last minute, so I'm just going to call you out now. No? Okay.
And just another comment, Kimberly, I thought of on the flexibility and why it's important, because for those that have served on the Accord for a while, there's been times where, you know, it's, hey, the Accord's not really relevant in this area. So we get a low score and, you know, hey, it's not really relevant. Things have changed. So I appreciate the fact that, you know, as this changes and reacts to the market, that then we can have more of a consistent scoring basis, because that's sometimes hard for people that are opposed to development to understand and why things are happening. So makes it easier on all of us also.
That's a great point. And I do think flexibility is important. I do think you may see some more applications just because this area needs to transition a bit. So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes me also think that it might be time to update the Rocky Fork Blacklick Accord plan. Possibly. We might be getting just a little out of date now, so that'll be the next project. What's your timeline, Chris?
So you're the first stop because you're the first stop with all development, so we want to get your input. We're hoping for some kind of endorsement. If there's certain conditions or things you want to see, that's fine. But we'd love to be able to say the Rocky Fork Blacklick Accord panel is supportive of this. Then we're going to go through the adoption process at the city level. So it would be going through the Parks Advisory Board, through the Planning Commission, and then on to council. Each of those stops, we're hoping to get a favorable recommendation. All the comments we get at those stops, then we'll aggregate and make some revisions to address those, and then take it to council for adoption. And you know, we'd love to, when we get to that point, love to be able to say we've got support from these bodies, and we've incorporated their input, and here you go, let's adopt it. So, so I guess timeline, we were hoping to get to council by March. So spend February really going through the rest of the groups, and then getting council in March. Steve, Adrian, anything else you want to add? Chris?
No, that's right on.
All right, perfect. Yeah, I certainly think that you've gotten a lot of feedback tonight. Nothing that's like a major change. Obviously, like my very long list of suggestions. The only one I feel like pretty adamant about is I don't want to see any residential along 161. That's pretty strong feeling about that. The other things are just things to consider that might make it better, and to try to integrate if you can. Does anyone else have any like things they want to strongly word as part of tonight, or are we at the point where we feel like we can endorse the plan as it is thus far?
I'll comment on that. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Forgive me.
No, that's okay, Ralph. I was just going to say that I didn't have any comments really that added to all that you've said. I agreed with really your comments. They actually went a lot further than I would have gone, but I think your training and your experience also have informed your comments in a very good fashion. It just certainly seemed very comprehensive. Obviously, that's part of its function. So I think you covered it very well, and I would certainly support a motion for us to endorse.
Okay.
Yeah. I was going to concur with that. You know, what if you had to deliver this plan at our doorstep like a year ago today? You would have to tear it up, you know, by now probably. So, you know, I think plans are plans. I think you do it with good faith and best intentions. And, you know, I certainly didn't see anything, you know, glaring in there. And, you know, you all know that you'll have to make adjustments to it depending on how things fall. So I'm supportive of moving forward.
All right. Thank you, Ralph. Anyone else want to share their opinion on this? Okay. All right. Well, do we have it sounds like we're all pretty supportive. So do we have a motion to endorse this plan as we see it tonight?
Ralph Smithers, so moved.
Do we have a second?
Seconded. Excuse me. Seconded.
Emphasize second. Thank you, Mo. Do we have any further comments that we want to share with the motion? Nope. All right. Well, let's put it to a vote then.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Mr. Chapelier,
Yes.
Mr. Gupta,
Yes.
Mr. Herskowitz,
Yes.
Mr. Lachey,
Yes.
Mr. Paul,
Yes.
Mr. Sellers,
I think Kyle dropped off. Yeah.
he did. He even told me that.
Yep.
And Mr. Smithers.
Yes.
Great. Sounds like
motion
it
carried.
passed. Perfect. All right. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for the great presentation tonight, Chris and Sarah. Appreciate all your work, and looking forward to seeing this final draft whenever we get there, sometime early this year, hopefully.
Yeah.
Can I ask one quick question of Chris? How's the best way to get a hold of you offline here?
Sure. You can send something to my email. I'll spell it for you. It's C Herman, so CHERMANN. As with Herman's come in different variants. I've got one R but two N's. So CHERMANN, and then it's at, and then the firm name MKSK Studios, and Studios is plural.com.
Alrighty, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Do we have any other topics to discuss tonight? No? All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I was gonna say, you guys just want to hang out here tonight. That's
just like hanging out.
Excellent. All right, perfect. All right, well, we are adjourned then. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Have a great night.
Good
Take
to see
care,
everybody.
everyone. Be safe.
Good night.
All right.
Take
Take
care.
care. Bye.
Yeah.